everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cooking with Robin. I'm Robin Gray, Director of Camrose Public Library, and today I wanted to share a few sauce recipes with you. Most importantly, my favorite pad thai sauce recipe. So I'd like to emphasize that with cooking, you can really kind of customize things, add in different flavors, take away certain things to really meet what you like in terms of flavor. With baking, you can't really do that. You really have to stick within those exact measurements or else, the cake won't rise or whatever the case may be. But in cooking, there's a lot more room to play. So I'm going to share my favorite sauce recipe, but you can feel free to customize it. For example, I'm not going to include onions because I'm not really a big onion fan. But if you like onions, please feel free to add some scallions, I guess, in terms of adding that flavor right to the sauce. But anyway, here's my favorite recipe that I'm going to share with you. So I'm starting off with 1/4 of a cup of maple syrup. It could be sugar, it could be agave. I use maple syrup because that's what I tend to have on hand. And the other thing is I'm going to be making this today in a jar because I'm going to save it for later and then put it on my favorite veggies and my favorite base, my favorite protein. So for right now, I'll put it in that jar and I'll be able to mix it up and then add it to everything later on in the day and keep it in the fridge for now. Next ingredient is mirin, 1/4 of a cup of mirin. So mirin is sort of a rice wine, a Japanese rice wine that is used in cooking. You can often find it kind of next to the hoisin sauce and sesame seed oil in the grocery stores. So I usually don't add anything but mirin. I really like the flavor that it adds. When I was living in St. Paul, I struggled to find mirin, but I never struggle to find it in Camrose. After that, it calls for 3 tablespoons of ketchup. Later on, I'm going to be talking about a sweet and sour sauce, and ketchup is also used in that. And after that is going to be 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. I tend to use low sodium, and then I can kind of customize the amount of salt I want later. In general, when I go out for sushi, I also have low sodium. That's just my own quirk. I'm not a big salty fan. I know lots of people are, though. Okay, so now that we've added the soy sauce, I'm going to add 1.5 tablespoons of lemon juice. You could use lime or lemon juice. Lime obviously has just a bit more of that strong citrus flavor. I tend to have lemon on hand just because then you can really use lemon juice for anything. Lemon squares. I make lemon water quite often, so it's often what I have in the house as opposed to lime juice. Of course, this dish could be served with fresh wedges of lime if you want to get really fancy. And then it calls for about 1 tablespoon of sriracha. I don't tend to have sriracha in the house. I'm not a big spicy fan, but the one thing I do have in the house at all times is this chili garlic sauce. So that's another one that, you can kind of find, like I said, along with the hoisin sauce, along with the sesame oil, along with the mirin at most grocery stores. And it adds a lot of spice while also adding a bit of garlic. So I'm not a big spicy person, but about 1 tablespoon is enough. That'll give it some kick without going totally crazy. Another option, one thing that I never had in the house for the longest time, but I've started having in my house is red pepper chili flakes. Sorry, the jar is really dark. You can't really see them. But they're quite delicious when put on avocado toast or when sprinkled on top of dishes. So it really lets each person that you're eating with customize their amount of spice. So another ingredient that is going to be added, and I could add it to the jar now, or I could just add it straight to the pan when I am preparing the rest of the meal, is garlic. So this recipe calls for about 2 cloves of garlic. I have to admit, I use pre-chopped garlic. That's probably really lazy of me, but I don't know. It just feels like chopping garlic is a really time-consuming thing, and this stuff doesn't go bad for a really long time, whereas garlic cloves can tend to go bad before I get a chance to use them all. And the other part of that is the garlic smell on your fingers. Although I've heard that a good tip for that is actually you can rub a metal spoon under water, like under the running faucet, and kind of rub your fingers on the spoon, and apparently that will get out the garlic smell. Feel free to give that a try. I haven't given it a try, but yeah. So yeah, about 2 cloves worth. So I usually, between a teaspoon and a tablespoon, I will call a clove. But so that's the sauce portion. So that's all ready for later on when I add it to different veggies. So some recommendations for those veggies are, one of my favorites is mushrooms. Things like bok choy, things like peas, edamame beans, corn, red peppers that you saute, like I said, onions. Any sorts of vegetables that you want, really. And shredded carrots is a really popular one. And then adding it with your own type of rice noodle. You can even add it to spaghetti. There's all sorts of options that way. I've seen a cold quinoa salad that looks really good that kind of is based on pad thai ingredients. So now that I've finished the sauce, you can add all sorts of veggies that you want. So my favorite combination tends to be mushrooms, corn, and red peppers. So I saute the mushrooms and the red peppers, and then I also add in my tofu at that point because my preferred protein is often tofu. It's just really cheap and really absorbs that pad thai flavor really well. So once you've sauteed those things and they're kind of nice and cooked, I guess, then you can add the pad thai sauce and let it all heat up and get really nice. And in a separate dish, you're going to prepare the noodles. So in my case, I prefer rice noodles, but you can do udon noodles, you can do soba noodles, you can do brown rice, white rice, you can do quinoa if you want. Pretty much anything that you would like for that base in terms of either rice or a noodle. And yeah, adding any types of veggies you want. Like I said, onions, peppers, peas, edamame beans, bok choy. It's pretty wide variety of options. And as well, instead of tofu, of course, you can feel free to add salmon, you can add chicken, you can add beef, whatever your heart desires. Just one other condiment while I'm pointing out some of the things that I tend to keep in my fridge. I like to have a sweetened chili sauce. So this is, I don't really know anything about this brand or anything. I just kind of, I know at the grocery store, there's certainly that habit of, they kind of keep the name brands everybody knows in the middle rows, which tends to be the most expensive. But then at the bottom, they tend to have the cheaper stuff that is just as good, but for way cheaper. Anyway, this stuff, I love it with chicken nuggets, and I put it on salmon. Like, you can just put it straight on salmon by itself, and it tastes delicious. I also wanted to point out that there are a few other sauces that often people will bought prepackaged that you can actually make really easily yourself. So one of them is teriyaki sauce. So basically, in kind of a small medium saucepan, you combine 3/4 cup of water, 3/4 of a cup of water, 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, 1 clove of garlic, 2 tablespoons either brown sugar or maple syrup, and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. And so you basically whisk it all up, heat it to medium-high heat, and then as soon as it boils, then put it down to medium-low heat. Keep whisking, and then as soon as it has really thickened, then it's ready, pretty much. So you can use that for putting right on meatballs or chicken, or of course you can use it as a dipping sauce for anything, including things like chicken nuggets or spring rolls. And another one I wanted to point out is sweet and sour sauce. So that one is 3/4 cup of water. You'll notice a lot of similarities, by the way. So 3/4 cup of water, 1/2 cup of brown sugar or maple syrup, 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar or white vinegar, 1/4 cup of soy sauce, 3 tablespoons of ketchup, and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch or arrowroot. So that, once again, pretty much the same thing. So heating it up until it's boiling and kind of sticky bubbles form at medium-high heat, then putting it down to medium-low until it's really thick and kind of at the consistency that you want it. And once again, it's just, then you'll have that sauce at the ready. I don't know. I know that these things are easy enough to buy at the grocery store pre-made, but if you make it yourself, you can really control what those ingredients are. Or if you don't feel like going to the grocery store, it's really nice to know that these things can kind of be made out of stuff that you tend to have around the house anyway. You know, I keep my fridge very well stocked with soy sauce, and I always have brown sugar and ketchup in the house and garlic and ginger. And yeah, so these things tend to be pretty easy to make right from home. And like I said, feel free to play with them. My favorite vegetables, I like to add those to these things, and my favorite type of noodle and my favorite type of protein. And you can feel free to do the same and really play with it. So yeah, that's everything I have for this week. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks.